September is not only back to school, but for some workers, it also means a return to the office.
But what if you're enjoying working from home? What are your options? What are your rights? Joining us now is employment lawyer Lior Samfiru. Lior, good to see you as always. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, if an employee is asked to return to the office but feels uncomfortable or actually likes working from home, first off, what are their rights? Is a return to the office, is it mandatory?
So ultimately, if an employer is allowed by public health to have employees back in the office, then certainly as long as the employer is taking all necessary safety measures, an employer is able to require employees to go back to their pre-pandemic work arrangements. So for many people that have been working successfully from home for the last year and a half, that does mean having to go back to work. And if you don't, that may be considered a resignation. That said, I think a lot of employers are going to be understanding and accommodating and having that discussion with the employer and trying to work out an arrangement either where you work from home or maybe part of the time work from home. That's helpful. Also keep in mind, if there's a real reason why you have to be home, for example, maybe you're the primary care provider for an elderly parent, an employer may have the obligation to accommodate. So certainly having that discussion with the employer is a very good idea.
I was going to ask about that. Can the worker ask or demand a hybrid work arrangement? I guess they can always ask, but is it always the employer's discretion?
So the way to look at it is that this pandemic that we've been dealing with for the last year and a half was a very unique situation. And as things open up, both employer and employee can demand that things go back to the way things were pre-pandemic. That's the real terms of employment. So an employee can demand to go back to whatever that arrangement was, and an employer can as well. Neither employer nor an employee can just change unilaterally terms of employment. So if you were working from the office pre-pandemic, your employer can tell you, we're going back to normal, we're taking all measures, and if you don't go back, that could certainly be a problem.
Okay, let's talk about vaccine mandates, because that's certainly a hot topic these days, and many companies are instituting these mandates in which you must either be fully vaccinated or submit to regular testing. So is this legal, Lior, and what are the rights of employees when it comes to a vaccine mandate?
Jeff, certainly this has been the hottest topic in employment law for the past number of weeks. So let's be very clear on this. Generally speaking, absent a government mandate, an employer does not have the unilateral right to impose mandatory vaccines with threat of termination. They actually don't even have the right to demand to know what the vaccine status is. We have legislation in Ontario, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, that says you can't demand personal medical information. Now, a lot of employers are doing that anyway, and I think there is legal liability there for them, and many may not realize that. They may have to pay severance to employees that they let go, up to 2 years' pay potentially, as well as other damages. Now, if there is a government mandate, in Ontario, we have some employers in the healthcare sector that are subject to a mandate. In the federal sphere, we have certain employers, those that work for the federal government or in transportation, where the government has imposed rules. But if you're not in an industry where rules have been imposed by the government, you actually may be working for an employer that potentially is violating the law if they're imposing mandatory vaccines.
Okay, here's another big issue. Google recently announced they're lowering the salaries of remote workers in non-urban centers due to a reduced cost of living. Can a company adjust your salary?
Well, I actually have a problem with the logic of that, because we're going to pay less to those employees that use less of the employer's resources. I don't really get that. But from a legal standpoint, if it's an option, if an employee is given an option, you can come back to work in the office and get paid normal, or you can have option B, which is you work from home but we'll pay you less. As long as it's an option, it's not mandated, it is legal, because the employer is not really reducing salary, they're just giving the employee an option. An employer cannot unilaterally make the decision and say, you're working from home and getting paid less. In Ontario and Canada, we would call that a constructive dismissal.
All right. Finally, Lior, I mean, we're in really kind of uncharted territory here when it comes to a return to work. So what is your best advice over the next few months for both employees and employers when we look at this possible return to the office?
Well, the old-fashioned way of looking at things was that the employees must support the business. Well, I think that businesses have to think about how they support their employees, because ultimately the employees are the heart, the lifeblood of the business. So employers and employees need to figure out arrangements that work for the both of them. Imposing things, creating mandates, drawing lines in the sand is just not a productive and effective way of doing things. So having that discussion, understanding what the needs and preferences and interests of employees is what's going to help a business continue to grow and thrive and get through this very difficult time.
Some great input. Lior, thank you so much.
Thank you.